Hi, good morning.
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
I'm Natalie Weiner. This is the wonderful Alynda Segarra with Hurray for the Riff Raff. And I don't know.
Thank you.
There are I'm sure, I don't know, a million accolades, a million albums to talk about. Just a fantastic musician and songwriter and just everything. So excited to be chatting with them this morning.
Yeah, really excited to be here.
And yeah, thank you guys for coming out early. First panel of the day. We're getting it going strong.
Totally.
But yeah, we're here to talk with Alynda a little bit specifically about The Past Is Still Alive, their album from earlier this year. It's so great. If somehow you haven't listened to it, it came out in February, so really you're behind if you haven't already tuned in. But it's nominated for Album of the Year tonight at the awards, NBD. And yeah, we're just gonna chat a little bit more about that and also anything else that we feel like talking about, if that sounds good with you guys.
Yeah.
So I think to start out, Alynda, if you could just kind of take us a little bit into the initial impetus for the album, where you were when you started writing, and then kind of go more into how that transformed through the recording process.
Totally. I started writing this record when we were still in lockdown. I was in New Orleans, and I was in the process of making Life on Earth, my last record. Me and Brad Cook were meeting in Durham. I was driving there because I didn't want to fly. We were taking COVID tests. It was this really intense time of not seeing a lot of people and being really separated from the world. And as we were finishing up Life on Earth, I wrote Snake Plant, and something opened up in my mind about memory and linear time and my difficulty living with linear time. We were all in this period of wondering if the world that we knew and the life that we knew was over. And it really made me take stock and think about everything I had lived already. And it really made me think about communities I've been a part of, people and movements that I've been a part of, that I've also just witnessed, And I started to feel this urge to be a documentarian, to use songwriting as a way to document these people that I loved and also kind of keep them. I felt this like time was going, like sand going through my fingers. And so it was my way of holding these moments and these people close to me. And then, of course, it turned into... Snake Plant is a perfect example because it also talks about my family. Yeah. So that was the original idea. And then I started writing these songs. I'm on the road, and my father passed away very suddenly. And he was a musician. He was a really big part of my life and a part of my music. So then I was set to go into the studio a month later. And it was this really dramatic and felt like mythological moment for me, where it was like, this is the vessel that I can put my grief into, my love into. I was so grateful to have this record to process. At first it felt like I was writing at this really academic, a little bit separated way, and then suddenly it became way more raw, way more stripped down and vulnerable.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think the way you've talked a lot about grief, obviously on the record and then kind of around the record, I feel like is so, I'm now thinking so much more broadly about what grief means, the way you're talking about grieving for your father, obviously, but then also kind of grieving your past selves a little bit by honoring it. And I think that's such a, we think of grief as something to get past.
Yes.
Right? And the way it feels to me, the way you're talking about it, it's almost like well, we need to like embrace this. Like we need to embrace it as a way to like honor, like find the like honor and the love, you know, that you mentioned too.
Yeah, I was really, you know, obviously it is such a big loss for me, but I remember feeling very scared. I felt like I was going up a roller coaster and I was about to go down and I didn't know how long I would fall for. And I remember just reaching out to friends, anybody who had experienced a huge loss like this, and I was so afraid, and I realized I felt like grief was a punishment. And it took me a little bit of time to realize that it's just another expression of love, you know. And I really was lucky to have people to fall back on and to have this record and to just find a way to live with it in a way, you know, to walk beside it. And this record really gave me that, you know, it was like the chariot to take me on that road, because without it, I think I would have been really lost, because we don't really have a lot of long-term ritual in our culture. And it's so unfortunate, because grief is like the most human experience that we're going to have. And it makes you more human, and it makes you more loving, and it makes you also like brings out the worst in you. It just, it really stirs up so much that you're trying to contain as you're like walking around, trying to be normal, going to the coffee shop, go to work. So I felt like I'm lucky enough to be a crazy artist, so I need to really allow all this stirring up. But I had this womb of the recording studio to work out that stuff. And luckily, me and Brad had already cemented a really strong working relationship, working on Life on Earth. So I was able to go in there and just kind of unapologetically be like, this is the state I'm in. So we're going to make this record. This is what this record is about now, you know, or at least it's our guiding light.
Definitely. I mean, you've mentioned, I think in some other conversations, just about like the response to this album and how it like, I don't know, could you explain a little bit like how it's been different maybe than you expected? Or
it was really scary. I was in a place, I think a lot of artists at this point, touring musicians, are constantly in a place of, should I go to school? Is this working? You know, but I think after lockdown pandemic time, I was in a particularly confused place, and I made this record, it just kind of being like, fuck it, like this is where I'm at, these are my songs, this is who I am. It was way more of a less perfectionist, less like thinky. And the response has been incredible. It's just been so loving, and it's been really thoughtful. The responses at live shows has been so much more like embodied, a lot of singing along that I never really experienced before. I've just been met with so much, a lot of relation. People just, it seems like there's a connection that people are really feeling to these songs. And it's funny because some of the songs are very specific, you know, very specific imagery to my life, and references to my friends and places that I've gone, and yet you can get so specific, and it's like, it's kind of like everybody has had a Miss Jonathan, you know, who I talk about in my song Hawk Moon. Miss Jonathan, the first trans woman I ever met when I was a runaway still, and she was just so wild and beautiful, and I felt very protected with her. And it's like, not everybody's had that exact experience, but everyone has had a person like her who sparked something in them, who 10 years later you're like, what would Miss Jonathan do right now, you know? So it's these kind of archetypes or something that are really alive for people.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's just always that, like, I mean, as a non-songwriter writer, you know, the further you can get specific, like, that's always like where the real stuff is. You know, like the more you can really like hone in on some little tiny crumb, you know, obviously Miss Jonathan is not a crumb, but
no, but like,
you know what I mean?
Granular.
Like really getting super in the weeds, like it actually works better than trying to say everything at once. You know? No, I mean, when it comes to sort of talking about those more specific parts of your past that feel like so maybe removed from like a lot of your listeners' lives, like I know you've talked a little bit like about just that for a long time you were maybe reluctant to, you know, sort of share some of those stories because I don't know, I can totally see how like that community feels like both really special to you and kind of like fragile in a way, you know, like precarious. I mean, and so how did you sort of come to a place where you were like, here's a way I can tell these stories, but also like not expose them, not make it seem like a voyeurism thing, you know, like that kind of thing?
I mean, it took time.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, a huge reoccurring theme. It just took some time for me to get a little wiser and for also there to be this separation where now I find people, you know, from this past life of mine, people that I lived with on the street or played with on the street or rode freight trains or whatever, their response is more like, wow, thank you for writing this down so that it exists in the history books of some sort. Now it's become much more of a, well, we need to write down these people's names because we don't have them anymore, or this moment on this certain campsite, or it's become so much more of a, we might lose it. You know, it isn't digitized. It isn't like on YouTube. you know, this funny thing about documentation right now. So I feel really lucky for that. And also, when I first started getting press, it was for Small Town Heroes, a record now that is 10 years old, which is really wild. And I felt like I had a lot to prove because I really wanted to be known as a songwriter. I wanted to be known as somebody who really is obsessed with craft and loves folk music and loves the craft of writing a song. So I just felt like I had some work to do. Yeah. And I still do, of course, but I feel a little bit more like, okay, I made 3 records now that I really love, and now I can talk about my life and be a little bit more vulnerable or raw.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's like listening to you talk about it and also listening to the album, it kind of, I mean, we were talking a little bit about Mary Gauthier and how it's like sort of
a hero.
Yeah, a hero, and like someone speaking to an outsider community, bringing an outsider community kind of inside in a way, you know, into a different format. And it's like, this is a little more random, but like, you know, Pedro Almodovar, the director.
Oh, yes, of course.
So like I just recently watched one of his movies, All About My Mother, and it's all about sort of
me to watch that.
Trans, different gender expressions, you know, and kind of like how close they are to a like normal life, you know, like how thin that line is between people who are like, this is more extreme, but like sex workers, like living on the street, like, and just like a person who's like in a regular apartment, you know, going to like a 9-to-5 job, and like that it's actually like a much more like kind of thin wall than we might believe, you know, like. And just sort of some of the stuff that you talk about sort of makes me think of that. It's like, no, it's all right there. You know, we're just not looking at it, you know?
Yeah, and that's the work that just called to me ever since I was young. Like, you know, that was the poetry that I loved. That was the music I loved growing up in New York. You know, when I found Woody Guthrie, it completely blew my mind. But I felt like Woody Guthrie was talking about similar people that Lou Reed was talking about. You know, it's felt like, well, they would hang out at the same party.
Yeah.
And like hang with the same people in the park. So this idea of folk music and rock and roll and outsider art, it all just felt it made sense to me, you know. So that was always kind of like this is just my world. With this record, I learned a lot about my language and just really zeroing in, and it felt so freeing to be like, oh, I can just use the words that mean something to me. Kind of writing out these key words of about riding trains or about busking or about being on the street or it all just felt like, oh, it's all just there for us to, we all have our own languages and keywords and everything.
Definitely. No, that gave me another thought, but maybe I should play a little bit of Hawk Moon of the
cool.
video.
I love this video. We recorded this video in this tiny town called Tucumcari, New Mexico. We lived out of this motel called what is it? It's in a lot of the photos. I think it's like it's not the Thunderbird, the Palomino, I think. Yeah. And we met so many incredible people there.
Oh, it might take a second. Anyway,
oh, yeah.
Keep going.
We showed up there, just a crew of 2 people with cameras, and then me and my co-star, Denny. And we just met friends along the way. We got this crazy old car that everyone's commenting on the internet. How did you find this car? I know nothing about cars.
How did you find the car? Where did it come from?
It was just a guy that we were just calling people through Google, antique cars. And this guy's like, oh, I got some cars. We go over there. We're like, what? This is such a steal, But everybody in the town was really incredible and welcoming, and then we made basically a little movie. It's kind of our Thelma and Louise vibes.
Do you want me to start it from the beginning, or just go to
no, I think
middle?
you can yeah, there we go. There's the car.
In the bus I sleep all day. In the back I am.
Fake money is so fun.
Everybody wants to know my name again. Just deliver to them. That's the way I've been taught I am. Anything, anyway, I drank a 5th before 3 p.m. Little girl with a buck knife and a fake ID. Sleeping bag and a backpack in the big city. And tell me why, what don't it look like? I'm always crying. You try to hide when you hide.
I was saying fake money is so fun. We have a scene later where we're just throwing it around the room, and it was just, everything looks cool too in slow motion. So.
Yeah.
But we were playing around with a lot of archetypes, characters. I've been obsessed with My Own Private Idaho. It's like a sickness. I just think about that film all the time. Think about River Phoenix, think about Keanu. And River Phoenix just really, he embodied this archetype of James Dean, and just this sad boy, dusty American character that's out wandering, has a poet's soul, is wearing work clothes, and you're like, you don't work, And that was the type of character that I was really drawn to when I first started writing poetry, when I ran away. And I just felt like, how do I just allow myself to kind of fill these shoes of this imagery, this romanticism, and it felt really natural, and it felt really empowering. We also play around with that on Colossus of Rhodes, which is a video made by the same director, and it's just, I'm so proud of it. Another song, too, that I'm really proud of on this record. Oh, I love her. She owned the motel.
Should I play a little?
Yeah.
Mountains, we could be up there if we could get up there. Say goodbye to America. I wanna see it dissolve. I can't be a poster boy for the great American fall. Now I'm out and I'm prowling. You make me wanna start growling. You will live forever as this bombshell in my mind.
Like that's not a set, you know.
We'll leave the screenshot.
Yeah. Yeah, that video, it was really good for me to make that video before we put out the record, because as somebody who's kind of shy, a little bit more on the shy side, and learning, you know, as we all are, to accept the way we look and accept ourselves, and it was really important for me to see myself in these videos and to see something that existed in my mind. I felt like I was freed of some of the trappings of, you have to look like this and you have to dress like this, and you know, that we're all told about gender, about everything. And seeing these videos back, it was a really vulnerable experience with the director, Jeff, to see the story, to see the world. It's really about world building, and it was like the world is coming to life, you know. It wasn't a character, but to see this side of me, this persona that lives within me, to come out, felt really empowering.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. I mean, I think like sort of putting your own spin, like you're saying, on the kind of like James Dean-y whatever idea. Like I do, in another conversation you mentioned like the beats, you know, like let's get into our like beat moment. And I've been thinking about them recently because I think like it's so heavily like white and male, you know, the way that we like think about that iconography. And obviously James Dean is not a beat, but you know what I mean? Like that like 50s like kind of countercultural vibe. Yeah. And I feel like that's so cool to like want to take that influence and like twist it around for now, you know, for a more inclusive version, a more inclusive vision that's more accurate by virtue of being more inclusive. Yeah,
and it's just what I like. And it's just the imagery that I like. So it's like, instead of throwing it away, it's like, well, how about like, what if I could be that, you know? And a lot of what if, a lot of playing, a lot of taking chances, and also a vulnerability of when you're playing around with iconography like this, you expose yourself to also just like being made fun of, you know, like people are so mean.
And but nobody's made fun of you.
No,
right?
That's what I mean. It's been like a really beautiful experience, and also it made me a little bit tougher of like, I don't care, you know. So it's been this whole record, like every part of the process, after the writing, after the recording, making the art that goes with the songs, it's all been a really transformative experience for me, of just feeling more comfortable in my skin. And
the goal for sure. I mean, looking at this picture and thinking about sort of like, or this picture, this still, you know what I mean? Like the idea of like an outlaw, you know, and sort of when you talk about living outside, you know, you're talking literally, obviously, but then it's like, I feel like on a figurative level too, there's so much there, you know. Like trying to be outside of surveillance, you know, and that was like, so I feel like it's kind of a through line of the album too, just the idea of like escaping in a way, or going undetected, or kind of like living outside of the, you know, what we're in right now, this hotel conference room where we're like being recorded. I don't know. Does that like, I feel like it could be an interesting way into the idea of outlaw, like a new thinking of it. Yeah,
you know, I think of the word that like a drifter. Yeah. And I've always, I felt like that since I was born. Even before I started traveling, it was like I didn't feel like I belonged in my family. I didn't feel like I belonged in my home. I was also being thrown around to many different homes, and always my happiest moments were riding the subway, you know, just being like, I will ride this subway car for 2 hours just to go to the wonderland of the Lower East Side. Like it was about like entering portals. And I feel like the time that I grew up in was also like the beginning of a heightening, or more of a like public acknowledgement of surveillance. You know, I was a freshman during September 11th in New York. It was like my first week of school. And it was like after that, people ask me like, why do you, well, not that much anymore, but just this like, what draws you to write songs that are politically influenced? I'm like, hello. Like, this is just the backdrop of what we've all been living in. So yeah, it was this, I was living in a counterculture trying to avoid being, what's really funny is we were all trying to avoid being documented.
Right.
That was the goal, to go almost like, to go unremembered.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be remembered. And then as, you know, with time and with creating a career and needing to be documented, needing to be, and also just like it becoming just so much more a part of our lives.
Yeah.
Learning how to make art with that, learning how to reckon with it, and also now learning how to go back and scour through and be like, all these moments that we told everybody, put down your camera.
Yeah.
And now it's like, where were the cameras? Yeah, it's a funny thing to look back on. But playing around with this, also really interesting to make these videos in this town Tucumcari. Everybody you talk to is like talking about how they built a new highway when Route 66 was really the way to go.
Yeah.
They were thriving.
Yeah.
And then they built a new highway, and now it's like nobody goes through anymore. Just to be in that type of environment of people saying like the modern world has left us behind, you know? Yeah.
No, definitely. Those corners of, it's New Mexico, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's so beautiful. But it is like, it gets too into like the thing of like, you go through and it's so beautiful to see the deteriorating stuff, but then you're like, ooh, that's like,
totally
that's sad to like have the deterioration be like the pretty thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, but also that's our country.
That's life. Yeah.
You know, it's our country. It's like, wow, I'm so happy to be in an environment that has some soul, that has some history, that has some life.
Yeah.
Not just another cookie cutter box, but then also being like, but these people need to live and they need to have, you know, this constant just like tension all over America, you know.
Definitely. No, that's so real. And I mean, one of the, you know, you were mentioning like keywords for the album, and one that I felt like popped up a number of times for me was war, you know?
Yeah.
Like you characterizing yourself as a war correspondent on The World is Dangerous. And I was like, that's such a good...
That's
like,
about somebody else.
Oh, okay, never mind.
No, but it is good. That's the other, you know, so much of this record is like talking to specific people. You know, I'm actually the wandering loser, which is so like, spoiler alert. Yeah, just somebody very close to me was doing really important humanitarian work overseas, and just this like, just a lot of tension, you know, like in all these relationships and in this record of me being like, what am I doing? Like, is what I'm doing anything? But then also finding a place where like our obsessions and our crafts really met in a really beautiful way. Yeah, but also to be so aware of, to have it be like, yeah, there's war brewing all over. Like for that to be, I think about that with Colossus as well.
Yeah.
Just creating songs that feel like bomb shelters, that feel like pillow forts, you know?
Yeah.
Places that for 3 minutes you can be in a protected space and still acknowledge what's happening outside.
Right. Not be throwing the wool over your eyes or whatever.
Yeah, but
like,
to be
safe.
Yeah, safe, just for a moment.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, I think that's so funny to learn, because I like was developing this whole thing in my head. I was like, oh, war correspondent, that's so smart. Like, we're in the war. Like, as you say,
I mean,
like,
it's also
the war
probably
is,
me. That's the
you
thing.
know, there's a war on the people. You
Yeah,
know?
totally.
And
That's
it's
so
like,
true.
it's just kind of like, I feel like these dispatches, like from the, like seeing it clearly is like, I don't know. I feel like there's constantly this conversation that we're in where it's like, well, once it gets really bad, you know, like we're waiting like for the revolution or whatever. We're waiting for like calamity, you know, it's like, we're in the calamity, you know, like it's already there, you know, you might not feel it personally, but like we're in it. You know, there are people who are feeling it. And so I think like the way that you characterize like there's a war on the people, you know, like, and then to be a correspondent to that war, you know, to provide dispatches, to provide like an honest rendering, an honest like vision of it, you know. I don't know.
That really speaks to me. I mean, that's the other thing about us songwriters is like we also don't know. Like we think we know what the song means, but really I'm just like fishing in my subconscious, you know, just like hoping some images like, come out.
That's when it's good, is when you can, you know, when there.
But then someone like you from the outside can see the threads that to me I might not put together. So yeah.
Well, yeah, not to get super intense. It's okay. we're very like.
I'm also rewatching The Sopranos right now.
Hey.
Always. That explains the shoes. So this is very Tony and Melfi.
What else are you kind of like reading, consuming, listening to right now?
Well, I just was writing about, I had such a hard time writing about this book that I'm diving into because it's theory, and I didn't go to college, so theory takes me a while, but I'm like digesting it in little bits. It's called Cruising Utopia. It's and it's talking a lot about time, and I really appreciate that. It uses this phrase straight time instead of linear time. And talking about our relationship with the past and the future and what we do about the present. A lot of ideas about hope, about utopia, that I find really, I don't know, really rich, and I'm really feeling inspired by it. You know,
that's awesome.
Sometimes with theory, it's like jazz or poetry that I'm like, I don't get it, but I let it wash over me, and then maybe like a week later, you know, I'm like, oh, I really feel it now, you know.
I mean, I think even if you went to college, it's still, as someone who went to college, I'm sure I would have just the same feeling reading it. But no, I mean, I think like that sort of idea of like utopia, of creating a future, like that was another, you know, I think big flashpoint that you've been touching on, is sort of the need to not be overly nostalgic, the need to like embrace the moment and like push forward. And there was actually a thing that, one of the things you said that made me think of a thing Lizzie No said when I spoke with her not that long ago, about how she's just trying to advance the cause of species survival. And I was like, whoa, that's beautiful. That's like such a cool way to like think about like creating a future when it seems like there isn't one, which I feel like
and also this really important, I've been thinking a lot about how artists right now, especially musicians, are in this really tough place where sometimes or often it feels like, is what I'm doing important at all? You know, like, does it have any value? It's really hard when you're not, when you're struggling on the road, or when you're just, but the work that we do, without being like overly romantic about it, it is a lot of envisioning. It's a lot of imagining, and it's a really important, it's an important part of society to have imaginers and dreamers, and also for us to witness other people's dreams that for whatever reason maybe they don't have the time to express these visions for the future, or these ideas, and someone like me gets to witness it, hear it, and be like, that's so important, other people need to hear this, you know. So I'm really trying to step into that role more, and I love when artists are able to be ambitious and the way that they talk about their work, and not be, it doesn't have to be like egotistical. It's the opposite. It's like serving a purpose, and it's an honor to do it, and it's difficult work, and it's also wonderful. So I'm really trying to step into those shoes too, and be like, I'm serving this greater purpose.
Definitely. I mean, and now I missed the obvious layup there because you just wrote about the book you mentioned in your new newsletter.
Oh, yeah.
Which everyone should subscribe to.
I've joined the Substack multiverse.
Resist Psychic Death.
Yes.
And
very chill title.
Yeah, exactly.
Very demure. Very mindful.
Again, we're in the war, right?
Yeah.
Resist Psychic Death. But
the name of a Bikini Kill song, a band that saved my life when I was 13. It really speaks to everything it's a practice. It's like to resist that. To resist psychic death is to resist losing your inspiration and your love and your passion for life, because there's so much that wants to numb us and wants to get rid of these little romantics and dreamers that live inside of us.
Have you felt already, I mean, you've only, you just started it pretty recently. Has it felt like a good release so far?
Yeah.
Like a different, sort of expressing yourself in a different mode?
Yeah, it really has. It's fun because I love having talks like this and talking to brilliant people like you, and like getting to nerd out. But it feels like now I get to do that with people who listen to the songs, and it feels also it's less focused on aesthetic and image and less about using a platform that's all about me somehow convincing you that my life is perfect. That's like so
I
much
think
of
the word we're not saying here is Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. Or like using TikTok, being like, I'm also so wacky and fun.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
It just feels way more me. Let's talk. This is what I'm reading. This is what I'm listening to. This is what I'm thinking about. And I feel like it's giving music lovers a way to also just learn more about what life on the road is like.
Yeah.
I think it's a really great bridge. I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. No, I mean, I feel like it's so ambitious whenever anyone who's also a musician like takes on the newsletter thing. I'm like, whoa, I can barely keep up with with mine. This is like, I'm impressed, but I've loved reading it so far. Excited to see what's to come. And again, you all better subscribe.
Yeah.
A lot of it is not behind the paywall, so.
Yeah.
But you should also be a fan subscriber. I mean, another sort of, well, we can talk, obviously, there's so many different paths to go down here. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned in a different conversation, just about the song Buffalo and like relaxing into your work. And I was like, that is such a great idea, creating by like, just like you said as you were doing it, like that it didn't, you felt like you maybe weren't doing enough, but then you just kind of let yourself do it. And I don't know, how did that feel?
Well, there is, to talk about ambition, sometimes also it can really hinder me. I write a song like Palante on the Navigator. It took like 3 years to write that freaking song. And it gets a little bit like, well, is this what I should be doing? Like writing anthems, and to put this pressure can also make it, that was just like, that song was supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
And then to allow myself to, it's like what I was saying, the language to come, like I started writing Buffalo, and a lot of the lyrics in this song are just memories of exactly where I was and what it looked like and what was happening. And we were in a little chapel that had children's shoes on the ceiling, More time also in New Mexico is where I started writing that song. And also this idea in Buffalo about patience and patience in love, and how really investing time and allowing a love to grow, and how difficult that is in our world. That's so like, I don't know, you can meet somebody else and maybe that somebody else is going to be better. This idea of like there's always something better around the corner. So Buffalo meant a lot to me in this idea of just slowing down a little bit and being like, it doesn't have to be an anthem. It doesn't have to be better, perfect. It could just be what real to my experience, you know.
And yet I feel like it's pretty anthemic. You know what I mean?
Thanks.
Like, it's like, it demands a sing-along. I mean, the repetition, I guess, is the cheat code there, but hey, it works.
It feels very mantra-esque to me. I really like it. That was like the first thing that I wrote was the chorus. And then sometimes you get a part of the song and then you're like, what are you trying to tell me? It's a lot of like medium work, you know? Talking to the ghost, being like, what are you trying to say? Where are we going? You know, and then it just slowly you find your way.
Yeah, no, I think like distilling that magic, it's like people in my role are perpetually like trying to get you to explain exactly how it how it happens. And I know it's like we have to accept like, I don't know, every song I know is different. And sort of like, I think in this album, it feels like you've so successfully managed to marry like lyrics that obviously you've spent a lot of time on with just kind of like the production musical side of it that like is like letting those lyrics flourish. And I know it's a little bit, it's more stripped down than your last album, right? Just a much more kind of intentionally like bare. And you said that you've started just with you and your guitar, right? And then kind of built off of that.
And that was really important to the process. You know, with Life on Earth, I really needed to break out of my own head, and we needed to explore, and I needed to write in a different way and play different instruments, and it was so fun and so good for me. And then when these songs started to emerge, it was pretty obvious immediately that these songs didn't need that. They needed me and my guitar, and we would record that and then add around it, you know, and it just needed the perfect little something, you know.
Touches.
Phil Cook, who plays dobro and keys on the record, and guitar, just writing the most perfect lines, you know, that are just flowing through him because he's a magical person. And that process was also really good for me to just be raw with my vocal takes. And a lot of this was like, we're going to do 3 or 4, and then we're not going to think about it. You know, because I didn't want to be perfect, and I didn't want to nitpick. And Brad, I had a lot more, you know, being in grief brain, a lot more like, I don't know, like, you tell me when you think you hear it, because I didn't have the energy to even nitpick myself. That's like the other beauty of like this horrible experience.
Well, sort of like deferring that choice, deferring that authority, you know, just kind of like entrusting your collaborators, obviously. Like, it's a lot of work to make decisions.
Totally. And also to just not want to try to be perfect. You know, totally. That is really something I'm always struggling with.
I mean, one other thing that just I was thinking about is like having gotten your start really playing on the streets, playing in all these different, you know, outside the box, literally scenarios. Like, what has it been like over the years for you to like step onto stages, you know, that are more elaborate than this, but you know, roughly in this realm, and kind of like places that are so much more, I don't know, big spotlights, high tech, I don't know. Like, how have you adapted to that, I guess?
It's really, I mean, I love it because it's more supportive. When you're playing in dive bars and clubs, which I still play sometimes, and, you know, or outside, there's so much that you're battling with. I feel like I have to go in with such a warrior spirit and armor on. And the subtleties are not as allowed because you're up against so much noise, and also just I hate proving myself. And when I'm able to play in a beautiful setting that's like elaborate or really professional, it just feels so much more supportive, and like there's so much more room to relax into the work. And there's nothing to prove. There's only like all these visual cues, and environmental cues to relax and to listen and to experience. So I love it, and I hope only to experience it more.
You're not trying to go back. Yeah.
I don't need to go back to the corner.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think in my mind, and maybe this is like a little bit romantic, but when I am talking to people who have that experience of like busking and stuff, it seems like you said, that like warrior spirit, like that's an intense learning curve. Like if you can convince people to listen to you, like just walking along on the sidewalk, like you can probably convince anyone. you know? Like, and I think that maybe, obviously it sounds enormously difficult, but is there a way that you feel like you're better for it? Like that you value that like learning?
Yeah. And also it was a really beautiful experience of playing music for everyone. You know, you could be a millionaire on vacation in New Orleans, window shopping, or you could be somebody who is homeless, and it's a beautiful day, so everybody's hanging out on Royal Street, and everybody gets to hear the band. And even if you don't have $1 to give us, it's really great to have people watch. You know, it was just, in that way, it was really important for my education. And also I was really lucky of playing a lot on the street with big bands. So there's a lot of learning how to listen, a lot of being like, I'm just playing the banjo, chunking on chords. It isn't really about me right now, you know, and learning when it's your spot.
Jump in.
Yeah, totally.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Kind of like double dutch or something.
Yeah.
You know?
No, for sure. I mean, but speaking of New Orleans, you recently relocated after a long time to Chicago. Yeah,
I just moved to Chicago, and I know that the winter is rough, so don't worry.
They're ready.
Everyone has
ready.
told me. I'm really excited. I've been lucky enough to play with Chicago-based musicians on supporting this album. Really amazing musicians like Namdi, Sen Morimoto, Marcus Drake, Parker Grogan, people who are based out of Chicago, and I just have been really welcomed into this music scene that I feel like is very interesting. It's a lot of genre bending, it's a lot of community collaboration. So I feel really excited about a new chapter, which really fits with the record. Kind of okay, here's a memory box, and now it's time to step forward. It's time to embark on a new stage in my life. So that's really exciting, a little scary, but yeah, I feel really positive about it.
Have you, I mean, obviously this is premature, you literally just put out this release, but are you having any like inklings of like dabbling in new creative projects, or kind of still like resting in what you've done?
Oh, I wish I could rest.
I feel that.
You know, no, I definitely have been getting little signs of inspiration and trying to write again. I think I'm at a stage now where I'm gonna have to trick myself into the writing, to not feel any pressure, you know. But it's happening, and I feel really positive about it. And I think I've learned also from friends and watching their careers around me, you just stay true to yourself, and you just write songs that are true to you and raw to you, and forget the outside world for a little bit. So I feel like that process is beginning. And this is the process, even though it's like so hard. This is the stuff I really love. Like the writing is the part that is just so exciting to me, and nothing better than finishing a song and a week later being like, it is good. You know, because when I first write it, I'm like, I just can't tell. So I'm excited for this period of getting back into the workshop.
Nice. Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, it's like you've produced albums at a pretty quick clip. I mean, Life on Earth and Past is Still Alive, like coming so quickly. I mean, we haven't really even just talked about the title, Past is Still Alive. Like, I feel like that there's so much there. And I read one review, and it was kind of like talking about how you describe like past, present, all
Yeah.
being one. And they were like, I wish that was true. And I was like, it is true. Like, that's why it's in the album. I was like, that's such a strange takeaway. I don't know. I just like love, like, of course the past is alive. You know, like we're in.
It's everywhere.
It's
Yeah.
exactly. Like it's in us.
Totally.
You know, like you're writing about. I don't know.
Yeah, and these people that we've lost are still with us. And the history of the places we live and go to are still with us. I mean, you know, I'm going to go to the Ryman later. You know, like the past is still alive in the Ryman. And these characters, these ghosts, these experiences, like they're all still here. So yeah, the title came to me, and at first, even for me, I was just like, what does that mean? And then again, with like the medium thing of just being like, tell me what it means. And then slowly I see it everywhere.
Yeah, no, definitely. It just feels like it's super potent, and obviously comes from one of the songs, right? It's in the lyrics. Yes, I can't remember which one right now.
Well, Snake Plant.
Yes, okay.
Which is, you know, to go back to the beginning, the first song I wrote for the album. Yeah, and just a song that is a memoir and a song, starting off with me and my dad and my aunt, who's his sister, who raised me, driving from New York to Florida every summer in a minivan with my brother and our cousins and a cat. And it was my first experience really going on the road. And it was my first experience going to the South, you know? And I just loved going on these long road trips. You know, I was probably like 5 or 6. And I loved when we would finally get to the Waffle House. And I would like put on a fake Southern accent. So I've always been this way. You know, and just really so excited to see new places and the feeling of Florida, the feeling in the air, the humidity, the plant life. It was also alive in me.
Yeah.
And it leads, you know, the song leads to me going on the road, and then it leads to, well, where are we now and where are we going? So.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a wonderful song. I mean, having talked so much about the album over the past few months, like, are there any questions that you haven't been asked that you wish people would ask, or ideas that you feel like you haven't gotten to touch on?
Nobody talks about Dynamo, and it's like you know, sometimes I feel like these songs are my children.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Dynamo's a good kid.
Yeah.
I really love that song. Nobody ever mentions it. It's pretty simple, you know, and that's why I love it. I feel like it's a really, I don't know, I'm proud of that one. And nobody ever mentions it, so I want to give her due.
Give her her due.
For, like, you know, songs about chaotic queens that run our lives.
Well, I got the 5-minute mark, so
Okay.
we're on the precipice here. I mean, I feel like we've covered so much awesome ground. Thank you so much for being so candid.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the quotes, and this is again a little bit heavy, but that you mentioned that I just wanted to bring up, of like, you said you didn't want to carry a liberal hope anymore. Like, and I was just like, whoa, that is like so real. I feel like for someone in your particular position,
Yeah.
kind of reaching the audience that you maybe often reach, kind of just based on everything.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, how do you kind of reckon with that, you know, sort of like carrying yourself through all these spaces where there are like kind of people projecting things onto you and expectations made of you?
Yeah, it goes back to why for a while I was just more guarded about this world that I come from, because I didn't want it to become a Disney version of it.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful and it's horrifying. It's everything, you know?
Yeah.
So just like the complexities, I think we lose a lot of complexities when we talk about certain artists and their work. And I felt like, especially after Navigator, a lot of people would ask me in interviews, like, how do you stay so hopeful? And I'd just be like, what? Like, I'm trying, you know? And also I'm learning a lot about hope, and I'm learning about like belief and how it is deeper, and it's not always pretty, and it's not saying everything's okay or that everything's gonna be okay. I just really want my work to say more of, well, this is the reality. And it goes back to what you were saying of, after Life on Earth, I felt a groundedness, a rootedness in this record of like, this is where we're at. This is what we're up against. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a lot of chaos, a lot of division, a lot of fear-mongering and violence around the world. And this is just where we're at. So let's embody our purposes. Let's like really embody how we were born in this particular time. That's so important to recognize that we were supposed to be here right now. So I'm really just trying to use this band and the writing to say, yes, there's a war on the people, and everybody should be carrying Narcan, you know, like these are the realities. And to also say, I am always dreaming about the future. I do think that there's a beautiful future that's possible, but we have to envision it, you know. And it's not going to be easy, but I don't know, to give up on that hope just seems like, well, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So,
no, I mean, we sort of like don't have a choice, right?
Exactly.
If we're going to continue to live, like we have to.
Yeah,
you know?
It's just our work to do. So, yeah.
No, totally. I mean, that feels like a really great place to end. I mean, is there anything else you wanted to share with our lovely constituents here?
Thank you so much for getting up early and coming to see this. It really means a lot to me. I'm really excited about tonight, and it's such an honor to be nominated for Album of the Year. I really wasn't expecting it, and it feels so wonderful. And I know my dad is really proud somewhere, you know. It feels really like I'm happy to honor him in even just being nominated. So thank you.
Definitely. No, it's amazing.
Thanks, you guys. Great job. Such a great job.